One day after Tanzania's tense and chaotic election, the country woke up to a strange silence that was only occasionally broken by the echo of sirens and the distant sounds of confrontation. In Dar es Salaam, the nation's bustling commercial capital, the streets that usually overflow with buses, traders, and the chatter of daily life were subdued. Small groups of protesters still roamed the outskirts of the city, defiant and angry, waving placards and chanting against what they believe was a stolen election. The air was thick with tension and the lingering smell of tear gas. Many residents stayed indoors, either out of fear or because the government had instructed civil servants and students to remain at home until further notice. Schools were closed, offices half empty, and businesses hesitated to open their doors. What should have been an ordinary weekday had turned into a day of uncertainty. Only the hum of military trucks moving through the main roads and the sight of heavily armed police at every intersection reminded citizens of the invisible curfew that gripped their city. The government, clearly alarmed by the growing unrest, moved swiftly to reassert control. A nationwide curfew was declared overnight, starting in Dar es Salaam and extending to other major towns that had witnessed bursts of protest. Soldiers patrolled the streets alongside police officers, setting up roadblocks and checkpoints that gave the city the look of a place under siege. Some main routes leading to the airport and major public buildings were closed off entirely. By morning, the usually vibrant Kariakoo market was almost deserted, a rare sight in a city where trade never sleeps. In the residential neighborhoods of Mbagala, Gongo la Mboto, and Kaluvya, the night had been loud with chaos. Locals reported hearing sporadic gunfire as police tried to disperse crowds that refused to go home. At least one civilian and a police officer were reported dead, though unconfirmed accounts from witnesses suggested the numbers could be higher. Burnt tires still smoldered on the roads, and the charred remains of barricades stood as grim reminders of the night's fury. By midday, internet connections across the country had slowed to a crawl, a deliberate move, many believed, by authorities seeking to prevent further mobilization of protests. Social media platforms became difficult to access, and communication between citizens was heavily disrupted. It felt as if the country had been plunged into a digital blackout. International observers criticized the shutdown, arguing that it silenced both protesters and the truth about what was really happening on the ground. Inside government offices, officials were trying to project calm. State media issued short, carefully worded statements urging citizens to remain peaceful and to respect the results of the election once they were officially announced. But there was little trust left. Many Tanzanians, especially the youth who had been at the forefront of demonstrations, felt betrayed by a system that had disqualified opposition candidates and left them with little choice at the ballot box. The mood among them was one of defiance, a determination not to be silenced despite the curfew and heavy security presence. In the streets, the contrast between peace and fear was striking. In some areas, people cautiously resumed normal routines, opening small shops, going to markets, or commuting short distances. In others, there was still chaos, groups of young people clashing with police, stones flying through the air, and tear gas drifting over rooftops. Taxi drivers spoke in hushed tones about arrests that had taken place overnight, while traders whispered rumors about areas where protests might reignite. Across the nation, a deep unease hung in the air. This was not the hopeful morning after an election that many had wished for. Instead, it felt like the country was standing on the edge, uncertain of what would come next. Authorities insisted that order was returning, but in the eyes of many Tanzanians, peace enforced by fear was not peace at all. For now, the government strategy was clear: contain the unrest through curfews, silence dissent through internet control, and maintain an image of stability before the world's eyes. But under that controlled calm, anger simmered. Many citizens whispered that this was only the beginning, that once the sun set again, the night might bring more protests, more crackdowns, and perhaps a deeper reckoning with the country's democratic soul. In Tanzania today, the day after the election is not a day of relief or celebration. It is a day of waiting, for clarity, for truth, and for peace that feels real, not forced. The streets remain guarded, the people cautious, and the nation suspended between hope and fear. In the uneasy calm that settled over Tanzania after the election, conversations from Dar es Salaam to Arusha carried a tone of exhaustion and disbelief. People spoke quietly in markets and bus stops, wondering aloud what had really changed. For many Tanzanians, President Samia Suluhu Hassan had once represented a rare flicker of hope, a leader who could heal divisions and reopen democratic space after years of political tension. When she first came to power, Her calm demeanor and promises of reform had stirred optimism across the country. She spoke of reconciliation, dialogue, and freedom of expression. But as this election unfolded, those early hopes began to dim. Many Tanzanians now feel betrayed. They say that instead of opening up democracy, Samia has closed the space further. The disqualification of major opposition figures, the arrests of outspoken critics, and the atmosphere of fear that clouded the campaign period left people feeling silenced. In Dar es Salaam, voters complained that polling stations were half empty because people no longer believed their votes mattered. "Why should I vote?" one young man told a journalist, "when we already know the winner?" In these quiet acts of protest, the decision not to show up lay a loud message of disillusionment. Still, Samia Suluhu remains popular among sections of the population who crave stability. Her supporters praise her for focusing on development, building roads, expanding ports, and pushing Tanzania's economic image forward. They argue that she has kept the country peaceful in a region often shaken by turmoil. Her repeated calls for unity and calm during the election unrest reminded many of her reputation as a peacemaker. Yet critics counter that peace without justice is not peace at all. They say that behind her soft-spoken image lies a government that tolerates no real challenge to its power. Across the border, neighboring countries have been watching closely. In Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda, news outlets and civic groups followed Tanzania's vote with growing unease. Kenyan activists were among the first to issue statements calling the election a coronation, not a contest. The Kenya Human Rights Commission went even further, declaring that Tanzania does not have an election, it has a crackdown disguised as democracy. From Nairobi to Kampala, editorials echoed the same fear, that Tanzania, once a model of stability, was slipping into the same pattern of democratic decay seen elsewhere in the region. In the halls of regional diplomacy, the reaction has been more cautious. The East African community had sent observers before the polls, praising Tanzania for its preparations and peaceful campaigning. But after reports of opposition arrests, internet disruptions, and violent crackdowns on protests, that optimism faded. The EAC and the African Union both stopped short of condemning the government outright, yet their silence spoke volumes. Behind closed doors, diplomats whispered about the implications. If Tanzania, long seen as the region's anchor of calm, could tilt toward authoritarian control, what would that mean for the rest of East Africa? African civil society groups have been far less restrained. Networks of pro-democracy activists from Nigeria to Ghana released statements urging the AU to hold Tanzania accountable for its handling of the elections. They called for the lifting of bans on opposition parties, the release of political prisoners, and a full restoration of press freedom. For them, this was not just about Tanzania, it was about the future of democracy on the continent. If Tanzania falls silent, one Pan-African rights advocate said, the rest of Africa will lose one of its last voices of hope for peaceful reform. Inside Tanzania, however, the mood is complicated. Some citizens defend Samia Suluhu as a stabilizing leader who must balance tradition, security, and progress in a divided society. They remember how she handled the transition after the death of John Magufuli and see her as a motherly figure who kept the country steady. Others, especially the youth, see her as part of the same system, a continuation rather than a transformation. On social media, despite internet disruptions, Tanzanian youth continue to express their frustration. They post videos of protests, share messages of resistance, and call for change. "We are tired of peace that silences us," one viral post read. In the wider African arena, the election has sparked a broader debate about leadership, democracy, and legitimacy. Many African leaders have remained notably quiet, offering only formal congratulations and urging calm. Few have dared to criticize openly. Behind the diplomatic statements, though, there's a growing recognition that what happens in Tanzania will shape the tone of governance across the continent. A stable Tanzania strengthens the region, a disillusioned one risks inspiring unrest beyond its borders. For Samia Suluhu Hassan, this moment could define her legacy. She entered history as Tanzania's first female president, celebrated for her humility and calm leadership. But she now faces a defining question. Will she be remembered as the woman who strengthened Tanzania's democracy, or as the one who allowed it to wither under her watch? Her calls for peace still echo across radio stations, her speeches urging citizens to put the nation above politics. Yet as soldiers patrol the streets and curfews silence the night, many Tanzanians whisper a painful truth: peace without choice is not freedom. Across the continent, Observers are holding their breath. Tanzania, the quiet giant of East Africa, stands at a crossroads. The people wait, some in fear, some in defiance, to see whether Samia Suluhu will reach out to heal the growing divide, or whether she will tighten her grip on power. For now, the story of Tanzania is one of two realities: a government calling for unity, and a people demanding their voice back. The world is watching, and so are Tanzania's neighbors, waiting to see if the promise of a peaceful democracy will be rekindled, or quietly fade into history. In the early days after the election in Dar es Salaam and other major centers of Tanzania, the focus was on heavy security presence, curfews, protests, internet disruptions, and the question of the legitimacy of the process. But further south, in rural villages, borderlands and countryside areas, the landscape looked quieter on the surface. Yet beneath that quiet there was unease, a sense of dislocation and cross-border tension. In villages across rural Tanzania, especially in those remote or near the border, many residents felt disconnected from the election drama. The ruling party's dominance in rural seats, a lack of visible opposition presence, and limited transparency in local polling meant voters often felt their vote carried little weight. Meanwhile, livelihoods tied to land, grazing, pastoralism, and small-scale agriculture were also entangled in the tensions. Communities who are used to local politics found the national election's heavy-handedness reminding them of how local agency had gradually shrunk. Meanwhile, across the border at Namanga, the town straddling Kenya and Tanzania, the mood was layered. Historically a busy crossing point for trade, goods and people, Namanga has seen a mixture of cooperation and friction between the two countries. Citizen Digital +3 African Development Bank +3 Pan-African Parliament +3 In recent times, Kenyan residents of Kajiado County bordering Tanzania have expressed concern about the porous nature of the border. For example, unauthorized crossings, informal trade and the short-circuiting of official controls. Kenya News +1. With the election tensions inside Tanzania, those border residents began to feel the ripple effects. There were reports of business slowing down in Namanga, truck queues piling up, cross-border movements being scrutinized, and trade firms complaining about delays. Citizen Digital +1 While I did not find credible evidence of mass threats of Kenyan citizens threatening to get into Tanzania, per se, what is clear is that local Kenyan residents are worried about illegal crossings, uncontrolled flows of people, and the security implications of what they describe as porous routes. Kenya News +1. In this environment, one rural Tanzanian village in Longido district near Namanga might wake up to the same morning as usual. Children heading to school, herders taking goats out to graze, but now alongside a checkpoint of soldiers, a police convoy, perhaps internet access still patchy, and the hum of trade vehicles backed up at the border crossing. On the Kenyan side, residents in the bordering villages might be discussing how the election unrest in Tanzania could spill across the border, how trade disruptions might hit their livelihoods, and how any instability might mean more surveillance or crackdowns at the crossings. For the rural Tanzanian citizen, this means not just a question of politics but livelihood. Will the local market continue to function? Will the grazing lands remain accessible? Will my access to administrative services, polling station, local government representative, still work? For the Kenyan border resident it means, will goods from Tanzania still arrive? Will smuggling or informal trade be shut down? Will the security environment tighten and affect movement? Will neighboring instability affect our markets? Thus, the countryside in Tanzania is affected, less visibly than the cities, but significantly. And Namanga, the border region, is a focal point where the election tensions, rural disenfranchisement, and cross-border anxieties meet. The story there is of two neighboring rural border communities facing a shared question: how to maintain daily life when political storms rage nearby. Across Tanzania, the air still feels heavy a day after the election, a silence that carries both exhaustion and unease. In the big cities, security patrols continue to roll through streets that were alive with protests just a day ago. Curfews remain in effect, the hum of traffic is slower than usual, and at every corner, people whisper rather than shout, wondering what comes next. Yet beyond the glare of Dar es Salaam's headlines and the tense standoffs in Arusha or Mwanza, a deeper story unfolds in the countryside, in the quiet villages, the border towns, and the lands where most Tanzanians actually live. In the rural heartlands, the election feels distant yet deeply personal. Many villages didn't see much of the opposition on the campaign trail. In some areas, the ruling party was the only name on the ballot. For farmers and herders, this election was less a contest of ideas and more a reminder of how far national politics can feel from their daily struggles. Some villagers voted out of loyalty or tradition, others stayed away, convinced nothing ever changes. The roads are dusty, the radios are quiet, and yet a quiet frustration brews, the sense that democracy still belongs to the cities. In places like Longido district, near the Kenyan border, the calm of the plains hides another kind of tension. At Namanga, the busy crossing point between Tanzania and Kenya, life has slowed. Normally, trucks roar past with goods, traders haggle across the customs fence, and border officers manage the endless flow of travelers. But after Tanzania's turbulent election day, that rhythm was broken. Checkpoints tightened, police patrols increased, and confusion rippled through the border markets. Some Kenyan traders grew restless, accusing Tanzanian authorities of hostility and warning that if the border shut down completely, livelihoods on both sides would collapse. Tanzanian officers, fearing infiltration or unrest spilling from Kenya, doubled down on inspections. Rumors spread quickly, stories of Kenyans threatening to cross over, of Tanzanian security forces fortifying their posts, of local Maasai pastoralists caught between two governments. The reality, though less dramatic, is tense enough. Both sides are on edge, suspicious but dependent on each other. In the dusty streets of Namanga, business owners worry about their maize and livestock stuck in transit, while local elders quietly plead for calm. What happens at this single crossing, they know, affects the entire economy of two nations tied by trade, blood, and borderland kinship. But not all rural unrest is tied to borders. Hundreds of kilometers north, near the North Mara gold mine, another form of discontent has been simmering. Here, in the small settlements surrounding the massive gold operations, the struggle is over land and survival. Villagers, many of them young and jobless, search for gold dust in the discarded earth around the mine, a dangerous act that sometimes ends in violence. For years, reports have surfaced of killings, beatings, and disappearances tied to security crackdowns around the mines. To the villagers, the mine represents both wealth and injustice. Gold leaves their soil every day, yet their homes remain poor, their schools empty, their roads broken. In this tense post-election week, the struggles of the rural poor, in border towns, in mining zones, in remote villages, form the hidden story beneath Tanzania's political drama. For them, the vote is only one part of a larger struggle. Whether it's losing grazing land in Ngorongoro, facing forced relocations, or being caught in the middle of border disputes, these communities live in the shadow of national politics but rarely feel its protection. Their silence now isn't peace, it's fatigue. The fatigue of watching leaders fight for power while their lives remain on the edge of uncertainty. In the coming days, Tanzania's government will try to project calm, soldiers in the streets, curfews in place, official statements promising order. But in the countryside, the calm is more complicated. It's the quiet of people who have learned to wait, to endure, to hope that one day the power struggles of Dar es Salaam will finally reach their dirt roads and dry fields in the form of something better: fairness, opportunity, or simply being heard. Yet as the dust of this election settles, one truth hangs heavy in the rural air, that in the villages, at the borders, and in the gold-stained hills, the heart of Tanzania is restless, watching, and waiting for a promise that still feels too far away. Across Tanzania, a new kind of tension has been growing, not just in the streets or polling stations, but in the rhythms and melodies that once united the nation. Music, the heartbeat of Tanzanian youth culture, has now become a battlefield of its own. In the weeks leading up to the election and in the days that have followed, the country's biggest stars, Diamond Platnumz and Zuchu, have found themselves at the center of a storm. Their open support for President Samia Suluhu Hassan and the ruling party, Chama cha Mapinduzi (CCM), has turned what was once a celebration of talent into a clash of ideals between artists and the very youth who made them famous. For years, Diamond and Zuchu have been icons of Tanzanian pride, voices that transcended politics, representing hustle, hope, and the dreams of millions of young people across East Africa. But when Diamond appeared at rallies praising President Samia's leadership, urging fans to stand with Mama, and when Zuchu declared on stage that she was proud to be a girl in the time of a woman president, many young Tanzanians began to question their idols. To them, this wasn't just artistic expression, it was an endorsement that felt too close to power, too rehearsed, too political. In the bustling neighborhoods of Dar es Salaam, where most youths live on the edge of unemployment and frustration, the reaction was fierce. On TikTok, Instagram, and X, memes flooded the timelines. Some mocked the stars, others expressed disappointment. "Diamond has the right to support whoever he wants," one post read, "but don't pretend it's for us, it's for the money." Others were harsher: "They sing for the people, but dance for the politicians." The comment sections of both artists' pages turned into public debates, some defending their loyalty to the government, others accusing them of betraying the struggle of ordinary Tanzanian youth. To many young people, the issue wasn't just political favoritism, it was about trust. These were the same musicians who had once sung about poverty, street life, and ambition, who spoke for the dreamers in the backstreets of Temeke and the miners of Gaita. Now, they seemed to stand beside those who the youth believed had failed to deliver jobs and opportunity. Their performances at CCM rallies, the music videos featuring campaign colors, and the lavish praise for government programs all began to look like propaganda wrapped in entertainment. In university dorms and roadside cafes, students debated whether Diamond and Zuchu were exercising their freedom of choice or selling out for political gain. "It's easy money for them," said one student in Arusha. "If they refuse, they might lose favor with the state. But when they accept, they lose us, their real fans." The sentiment echoed across Reddit threads and Tanzanian discussion forums. Admiration for the artist's craft mixed with deep skepticism about their motives. Some observers believe the government's strategy is deliberate, using celebrity culture to soften political messaging and connect with a restless generation. Music, after all, reaches where speeches cannot. But that same reach also amplifies resentment when fans feel manipulated. As one young blogger put it, "They turned our concerts into campaigns. We went to dance, and they made us listen to politics." Even smaller artists have begun to whisper their fears. In recording studios around Dar, up-and-coming musicians say they feel pressure to avoid politically sensitive lyrics. The Arts Council, BASATA, has been known to ban songs that criticize the government, creating a quiet fear that pushes creativity toward conformity. Those who refuse to align risk losing performance licenses, radio play, or invitations to lucrative state events. It's a trade-off many can't afford, and one that the youth see as yet another sign that freedom of expression in Tanzania is tightening. The effect of all this has been a slow erosion of faith, not only in politics but in art itself. The same youths who once filled stadiums for Diamond's concerts now question whether the music industry still belongs to them. They feel voiceless in politics and now silenced in culture, caught between leaders who won't listen and celebrities who won't speak for them. Yet beneath the cynicism, there is still admiration. Some still defend Diamond and Zuchu, arguing that their support for Samia Suluhu might come from genuine respect for her leadership and not just convenience. They see in Samia a continuation of stability, a figure who has guided the country through economic recovery and modernization. But for many others, this alliance feels like a betrayal of authenticity, the moment when music stopped being rebellion and became endorsement. As Tanzania's youth navigate the tension of politics and pop culture, they find themselves asking deeper questions. Who really speaks for them? Can music still be a voice for truth when it's used as a tool for power? The answers are unclear. But in every street corner, dorm room, and dusty village where Diamond songs still play, there's a new kind of silence, not of applause, but of reflection. The beats are the same, but the meaning has changed. For now, Tanzania's rhythm is still strong, but its harmony feels uncertain, a generation dancing to songs they no longer fully believe in.